1954. Marilyn Monroe walks into a room full of scientists. They're laughing at the dumb blonde. She starts talking quantum physics. The laughter stops. Hollywood buried this story. Here's why. Forget everything you think you know about Marilyn Monroe. Forget the dumb blonde. Forget the sex symbol. Forget the ditzy voice and the wiggle. That was a character, an act, a brilliant, calculated performance. Because here's the secret Hollywood never wanted you to know. Marilyn Monroe was a genius. Not movie star smart, not street smart. Actually genius-level intelligent. Her IQ was reportedly a 168 higher than Albert Einstein's estimated 160. The woman you think spent her time giggling and batting her eyelashes? She was reading Dostoevsky, studying method acting with Lee Strasberg, discussing philosophy with Arthur Miller, and running her own production company when women weren't allowed to run anything. But Hollywood had a problem. In the 1950s, men didn't want to watch movies starring women smarter than them, so they made Marilyn hide her intelligence. Play dumb, act helpless, pretend she couldn't understand simple questions. And Marilyn, the most brilliant actress of her generation, played the role so well that 60 years after her death, people still believe the character was real. This is the absurd, hilarious, tragic story of how Marilyn Monroe trolled the entire world and got revenge on everyone who underestimated her. Let's start with the truth. Marilyn Monroe didn't exist. She was invented. The real person was Norma Jean Mortensen, born in 1926 in Los Angeles. Her childhood was a nightmare. Mother institutionalized with mental illness, 11 different foster homes, sexual abuse, poverty. At 16, she married a merchant marine just to escape foster care. By age 20, Norma Jean was working in a factory during World War II. A photographer came to take pictures of women supporting the war effort. He saw Norma Jean and said, "Kid, you should be a model." So she became one. And she was good, really good. She understood angles, lighting, what the camera wanted. Within months, she was on magazine covers. But modeling wasn't enough. Norma Jean wanted to act. So in 1946, she signed with 20th Century Fox. They looked at this smart, articulate, brown-haired woman and said, "This won't work. You need to be different." They bleached her hair platinum blonde, gave her a new name, Marilyn Monroe, taught her to speak in a breathy, childish voice, told her to walk like her shoes were too tight, made her act like she'd never read a book. And here's the genius part. Norma Jean understood this was a business transaction. She said, "Fine, you want a dumb blonde? I'll give you the greatest dumb blonde performance in history, but I'm still me underneath." For the next 16 years, Marilyn Monroe played a character named Marilyn Monroe, and she was so good at it that she trapped herself inside the performance. But every once in a while, the real Norma Jean would peek through, and it terrified Hollywood. Here's where it gets absurd. Marilyn was living two completely different lives. Public Marilyn giggles at press conferences, pretends not to understand questions, says things like, "I don't know who Karl Marx is, but I know you," shows up to events in tight dresses with nothing underneath, acts shocked when photographers take pictures. Private Marilyn reads James Joyce's Ulysses, studies Stanislavski's method acting, takes classes at UCLA in literature and art history, has serious conversations about politics and philosophy, runs Marilyn Monroe Productions, one of the first actress-owned production companies in Hollywood. The press would interview her and ask insulting questions like, "Do you wear anything to bed?" And Marilyn would giggle and say, "Just Chanel number 5. Then she'd go home and read Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov with notes in the margins. Photographers would pose her standing over subway grates with her dress blowing up. She'd smile and play along. Then she'd go to the actor's studio in New York and study with Lee Strasberg, the most demanding acting teacher in America, who said Marilyn had more natural talent than anyone he'd ever taught. Reporters would write articles calling her a dumb blonde. She'd read them, laugh, and say to friends, "They have no idea." Then she'd negotiate her movie contracts better than most male actors, demanding approval over directors and scripts. The most absurd part? It worked. Marilyn became the biggest star in the world by pretending to be stupid. Men wanted her because she seemed non-threatening. Women liked her because she seemed accessible, and nobody suspected she was playing them all. Well, almost nobody. Marilyn is at the peak of her fame. She's just finished The 7-Year Itch, the movie with the famous subway grate scene. She's the highest paid actress in Hollywood. But Marilyn is tired of playing stupid characters. She wants to do serious drama. She wants to prove she's a real actress. So she moves to New York, studies at the Actors Studio, and does something absolutely insane. She's photographed reading James Joyce's Ulysses in a playground. Now, Ulysses is one of the most difficult books in English literature. It's 700 pages of stream of consciousness experimental prose that makes English professors cry. Most people can't finish it. Many people can't understand it. And here's Marilyn Monroe, the dumb blonde, casually reading it on a playground swing. The photo is published, and people lose their minds. Some critics say it's a publicity stunt. She's not really reading it. Someone told her to hold it for the camera. Others say even if she is reading it, she doesn't understand it. But here's the thing. Marilyn's personal library, auctioned after her death, contained over 400 books. And they weren't for show. They had notes in the margins. Underlined passages, bookmarks. She actually read them. Poetry, philosophy, political theory, psychology. Marilyn also collected art, not celebrity vanity art, serious pieces by contemporary artists. She studied photography. She wrote poetry. She kept journals analyzing her own performances in psychology. The woman everyone thought was a bubblehead was actually an intellectual hiding in plain sight. And when Hollywood executives saw that photo of Marilyn reading Joyce, they panicked. Because if America realized Marilyn Monroe was smart, the fantasy would collapse. Men would feel intimidated. The box office would suffer. So what did they do? They doubled down. They gave her more dumb blonde roles. They spread rumors that she was difficult, unreliable, always late. They controlled the narrative. And Marilyn, exhausted from living a double life, started to break. Let's talk about Marilyn's love life, because it's hilariously tragic. Marriage number 1, Joe DiMaggio, 1954. Baseball legend marries movie star. America's golden couple. Except Joe wants Marilyn to be the private version, stay home, cook dinner, stop making movies, stop being sexy in public. He's jealous every time another man looks at her. The marriage lasts 9 months. They divorce after Joe sees the famous subway grate scene being filmed. Thousands of men watching Marilyn's dress blow up. Joe is humiliated and furious. But here's the absurd part. Joe never stopped loving her, even after the divorce, even after she married someone else. When Marilyn died in 1962, Joe arranged her funeral and had roses delivered to her grave 3 times a week for the next 20 years, until he died. Marriage number 2, Arthur Miller, 1956, playwright and intellectual, one of America's greatest writers, author of Death of a Salesman. This should have been perfect. Finally, Marilyn could be with someone who appreciated her intelligence, someone who understood her, someone who saw past the performance. Except Arthur made a terrible mistake. He wrote about her. While they were married, Arthur wrote a screenplay called The Misfits for Marilyn. In it, the main character is a beautiful but damaged woman who's not very bright. Marilyn read it and realized, Arthur sees me the same way everyone else does. Even my intellectual husband thinks I'm just a pretty face. The marriage fell apart. They divorced in 1961, just 5 years after the wedding. The absurd irony? Arthur Miller, brilliant playwright, was too stupid to realize his wife was as smart as he was. Maybe smarter. Now we get to the conspiracy theory part. And honestly, it's so absurd it might be true. Marilyn is allegedly having affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General. Some historians say this never happened. Others say it definitely happened. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But here's what we know for sure. Marilyn attended political events with the Kennedys. She famously sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" to JFK in May 1962, wearing a dress so tight she had to be sewn into it. And according to some sources, Marilyn was keeping a diary, writing about her conversations with the Kennedys, about things they told her, political secrets, mafia connections, plans to assassinate Fidel Castro. Why would powerful politicians tell secrets to Marilyn Monroe? Because they thought she was too dumb to understand what she was hearing. They'd talk openly around her because they saw her as decoration, entertainment. They didn't realize she was paying attention, taking notes, understanding everything. And when the Kennedys realized Marilyn was smarter than they thought, when they realized she might be a liability, they cut her off, stopped taking her calls, abandoned her. 3 months after singing Happy Birthday to the president, Marilyn Monroe was dead. August 5th, 1962. Marilyn is found dead in her Los Angeles home, age 36. The official cause, probable suicide by barbiturate overdose. But nothing about her death makes sense. The crime scene is disturbed before police arrive. Her housekeeper washed sheets and cleaned the room. The timeline doesn't add up. Different witnesses report different times. There's no water glass in the room, but she supposedly swallowed dozens of pills. Her phone records disappear. The autopsy has inconsistencies. Some people believe Marilyn killed herself because she was depressed, abandoned by the Kennedys, struggling with addiction. Some believe she was murdered by the mafia to embarrass the Kennedys. Some believe she was killed by government agents because she knew too much. Some believe it was an accidental overdose covered up to avoid scandal. We'll never know the truth. Too much evidence was destroyed or hidden. But here's the most absurd part. Even in death, people assume Marilyn was too stupid to be a threat. The official narrative became, tragic blonde actress, mentally unstable, killed herself over men who didn't love her. They turned her death into the same dumb blonde story they'd been telling her whole career. Poor, fragile, beautiful Marilyn. Too sensitive for this world. It's the perfect ending to the character, and it completely erases the real woman. Here's what actually happened. Norma Jean Mortensen was an intelligent, ambitious, damaged woman who created a character called Marilyn Monroe. She played that character so perfectly that she became trapped inside it. Every time she tried to show her real self, Hollywood pushed back. Every time she tried to do serious work, they gave her another dumb blonde role. Every time she tried to be seen as smart, they reminded her that America didn't want smart. They wanted fantasy. And the absurd tragedy is, Marilyn was a better actress than anyone knew. Because she wasn't just acting in movies. She was acting 24/7, every interview, every photograph, every public appearance. She was performing Marilyn Monroe. The real woman? We barely know her. We have glimpses in her books, her poetry, her letters. We have testimony from people like Lee Strasberg who saw her genius. We have evidence that she was far more intelligent, complex, and capable than the image suggests. But the world preferred the fantasy, so that's what they remember. Here's the most ridiculous part. Marilyn Monroe is still underestimated 60 years after her death. People still reference her as the stereotypical dumb blonde, still use her image to sell sex, still treat her like a joke. She played the role so well that even death couldn't break the spell. But maybe, just maybe, Marilyn got the last laugh. Because think about it. She made millions playing a character she invented. She controlled her image so completely that it's still iconic decades later. She outsmarted every Hollywood executive who underestimated her. She got men to worship her while thinking she was harmless. She infiltrated the highest levels of American power because people assumed she was too dumb to understand what she was seeing. Marilyn Monroe was a working-class girl with no education who became the most famous woman in the world, ran her own production company, negotiated her own contracts, studied with the best acting teachers, read philosophy and literature, and drove men insane while they thought she was the helpless one. That's not tragedy, that's genius. The absurd truth about Marilyn Monroe? She was smarter than almost everyone who knew her. Smarter than the directors who treated her like decoration. Smarter than the executives who thought she was just a sex symbol. Smarter than the husbands who wanted to own her. Smarter than the journalists who mocked her. She knew exactly what she was doing. She played the game better than anyone. And when she died, she left behind a legend so powerful that we're still talking about her 60 years later. The Dumb Blonde Act. It was the greatest performance in Hollywood history, and we all fell for it. Marilyn Monroe didn't just fool America. She trolled an entire civilization, and she's still trolling us from beyond the grave. Because here we are, decades later, still debating whether she was smart or dumb, still arguing about whether she was a victim or a mastermind. And somewhere, wherever Marilyn is, she's probably laughing at all of us. The joke was always on us. If Marilyn's secret genius blew your mind, subscribe to discover more hidden truths about legends who played the long game, like if you'll never see Marilyn the same way again. Comment below, who else in Hollywood is smarter than we think? Let's honor Marilyn by finally seeing the real woman behind the performance.